All right, so it is 8:30, and I actually don't know how long this presentation is going to take, so we can jump right in. I don't know because the first time I'll introduce myself first. My name is Erica Teal. Teal like the color. We can thank my husband for that awesome branding. Makes my life a lot easier. Claps for him. I am a teacher of students with visual impairments, or a TVI, and I have been working in the field since 2019. The last time I did this particular presentation, it was for an assistive technology conference with other people in my field in 2020. And when I was making sure all my files were in order and everything was all set and ready to go, I realized I hated it. So I spent my downtime during MAGFest redoing some of the slides, changing a couple things, moving some things around, and I finished it this morning. So I really hope you enjoyed the new stuff. I feel a lot better about it, and I think it's going to have a lot more relevant information, especially to people who aren't in my field. It was a little like field-centric, and I wanted to make it MAGFest-centric. All right, so Binaural and Blindness, how immersive gaming is making video games more accessible. We're going to be talking about different sound design techniques, as well as how people with visual impairments navigate their environment, and then how those two can sort of synthesize together. So, whoa, slow down there. All right, so I'm one of those jerks who likes audience participation. Sorry. Why do we play video games? I would like 5 reasons. They can be as deep or as shallow as you want them to be.
To escape from reality.
To escape from reality, that's 1. What's number 2? Graphics. What's number 3?
Play with friends.
To play with friends. What's number 4?
Good storylines.
Good storylines. What's number 5?
Teabagging.
Sorry, what?
Teabagging.
Teabagging, okay. Sure, yeah. There's a lot of reasons. We could probably keep going, but those are all very valid. So what I would like to point out is that there is an array. Someone did say graphics, but if we think about it, there's so many reasons to play the games. There are so many approaches, there's so many experiences, there's a lot of factors that go into a game. It's not just about the looks, it's about the story, the social aspects. That's my personal driving factor. The cuteness factor, that's another important factor to me. There are a lot of different things that go into a game, which is why when I was talking about this panel to someone, they said to me, why would a blind person want to play video games? And I couldn't answer. I literally just had a brain shut down for a moment because storyline, friends, teabagging, like there are so many reasons to play games. Like, why wouldn't a blind person want to play video games? Like, it's so much more than just a visual media. It's a social experience. It's fun. It's storytelling. Of course they're going to want to play just like anybody else. They just need to come up with new strategies. I feel like a lot of people kind of forget that people with disabilities are people who have similar interests to everybody and probably enjoy the same things as us. And so they're overlooked when we're thinking about video game design. Video games are played by people with visual impairments, and this whole panel is about how they are able to do that. So we are going to start with sensory efficiency, which is one of the 9 areas of the expanded core curriculum. As a teacher of students with visual impairments, my job is to teach what is called the ECC, which is additional specific areas of need that people with visual impairments have that need to be deliberately taught. So while sighted people can pick up things like social cues and skills and time management and software use just by watching other people do it, people with visual impairments can't, so that's where I step in. So there are 9 different areas. If you want to know what they are, I can read them off. Yeah, no, okay. But one of them is sensory efficiency. And that means how do you utilize your other senses to participate in the world around you? This is a developed skill. There is some research that shows kinda that if you lose your sense of sight, your other senses get stronger. But really what it boils down to is that these are intentionally taught skills. When I started off in the field, I was terrible at reading Braille by touch. And after, like I said, since 2019, so after all of these years, I can now proudly say that I'm only kind of bad at reading Braille by touch. And that is just because I have built up the skill over time. So this is something that is intentionally taught, how to use your extra senses, how to use touch, and also, of course, how to use sound. And it also includes using smell. I like telling a story about the president of my company, Randy, who's a very sweet guy. We were at an event, and I am obsessed with these little smelly hand sanitizers from Bed Bath & Beyond, and I put some on my hand, and he said, "Erica, did somebody come over?" And I said, "No, it was just me putting hand sanitizer on." He said, "Okay, I just smelled something different." I, as a sighted person, didn't even think of it. I could smell it, but I was like, it's just a smell, whatever. And those in the conversation with us all either saw me put on the hand sanitizer or barely noticed the smell. But Randy has been specifically taught to identify smells and associate there is a new smell with there is a new person. So sensory efficiency covers all of your senses and how you are using them, which of course includes sound, which is what we're talking about today. One of the other areas of the ECC is orientation and mobility, which is O&M. If you are an O&M, that means you are certified to teach specifically orientation and mobility. This includes things like cane skills, the actual acts of listening, assistive technology, device, and daily living skills. I teach a little of it, but there's a different certification where you can kind of specialize in that. So there are people who specialize in those skills. Orientation is what it sounds like. It's how you figure out where you are in your space, and mobility is how to move around said space. The way that you move around these spaces is by using your sensory efficiency, using your sense of touch, using your sense of smell, and of course using your sense of hearing. Hearing is one of the big ones. When you're crossing a street, you listen for cars, and there are strategies for listening. Is a car coming towards you or away from you? When you're learning these skills, there are activities that we teach where we will have like something making a noise and we'll bring it towards you and you have to tell me how far away it is from you. We practice using the sense of hearing to figure out where in a space we are and where in a space obstacles are. So why not use that in a video game, right? People already do. So I have on this slide Ben Breen, aka Sightless Combat, who is a gamer without sight. He is very talented, achieved the highest rank in online fighting game Killer Instinct, despite having no functional vision. He talked in an interview with Eurogamer about his process for how he plays the game. He says, here's the quote, "A large amount of the work, figuring out how to navigate in a game, was already done before I actually got my hands on the game. The sound designers have done well to give individual characters their own personalities, even just with small sounds such as their footsteps." So he listens to the way the characters move in the space and the way that they produce their different sounds, and from there can tell what attacks are coming and where they are on the field. And as a result, he is a very talented gamer. So Killer Instinct, the game is stereo, it's not binaural, so we'll talk a little more about those differences later, but just keeping on that in mind. There are other competitive gamers. I don't know how to pronounce this last name, unfortunately, but Sven Vandeweghe, I think. Sorry? Vandeweghe, okay, yeah, thank you very much for that. He is also Blind Warrior Sven. He was actually the first one that I had heard of. He participated, yes? Sorry. He participated in an international tournament for Street Fighter V hosted by Red Bull in 2017. When he was a kid, he lost his vision because of a brain tumor, and he actually got used to the game because he was just hanging out with his friend and heard him play and was like, hold the phone, I can understand what's going on if I just listen for it. And that inspired him to take up and resume playing video games in his childhood. And then he went on to win awesome tournaments and stuff. The last one is Carlos Vasquez, I couldn't find a picture of him, unfortunately, but he is a Mortal Kombat player. His first competition was Evolution, which is a major fighting game competition, and that was in 2013. While he was at the event, he was doing some networking, and he started giving some people ideas about how to make the sound designs more accessible for visual impairments through those sound design strategies. In the game Injustice: Gods Among Us, there's actually a sound cue that is produced when the character approaches an object that they can interact with, and that's actually in the game because of Vasquez. So we have all of these gamers not only playing, competing, winning tournaments, a lot of them talk about their experiences online, and they're also impacting the field. All right, moving on to our next bit. If you are not necessarily into combat games and competitions, there are also audio games. There is audiogames.net, which is just a collection of different audio games. And when I brought up this panel to Randy, he told me about Where is My Ducky, or Where's My Rubber Ducky? And I'm going to let the description do it because I cannot do it justice, so I'm just going to read this to you. Zombies from outer space invaded Earth, took all the women, good food, and Jack's rubber ducky. Jack sets out on a zombie-killing rampage to get back his rubber ducky so he can take a bath. Armed with a shotgun, machete, and surrounded by zombies, Jack is certain to introduce those rubber duckies stealing alien zombies to a world of pain. There's just one problem. Jack is blind. Use your hearing to locate zombies before they attack. Pull the trigger or machete the hell out of them to retake Jack's rubber ducky. So there you go. Sounds like a good time. Yeah, right? Doesn't that sound great? So that came out from him. I haven't had any experience playing it, but hey there. But it certainly sounds really fun. Ones I'm going to go into with a little more depth is Papa Sangre and A Blind Legend, which I have. I'll talk a little more in depth about those because they're like my examples. There are also other websites. I have also seen that there are game jams specifically designed for audio games. And also, please make some more. My personal request, if you are a game designer who wants to break into a niche that really needs to be filled, please make audio games that aren't horror games. I am a huge wuss, and they're always horror games, and I want to play them, but I'll cry. So please make cute, fun, cozy games. Can you make a farming sim that's sound-based or something? But no, seriously, this is a field that is up and coming, and there's a lot of potential to really impact it if you are looking for ways to really stretch your creative engines. That is, I can guarantee you, a market for audio games. So we're going to talk in specific about Papa Sangre and its sequel. They were made by Something Else for the Apple operating system. Unfortunately, the games are no longer available, so I didn't get to play it, but I did watch some demos and playthroughs, which were upsetting because it's a scary game. So the plot of the game is that you're traveling through the underworld that is ruled by Papa Sangre, trying to find the soul of someone who was important to you. And you pass each level by following the sound of music notes. So when you hear a music note, you move yourself towards it. If you find that note, you then have to go and find the next note, and the next note, and the next note to navigate your way through this. There's a wheel at the top of the screen that you use to adjust your directions, as you can see in the picture. And you walk by alternating your footsteps by tapping on the left and right foot back and forth and back and forth. The challenge of this is, of course, that there are threats. There are ominous, monstrous sounds looming out in the darkness, and you have to make sure that while you are finding your notes, you are also avoiding those sounds. So there is that element of suspense and danger. It's not just, oh, let's go find the thing. It's that's some scary stuff out there. So Something Else did make the sequel, and they made some other games. They removed them from the App Store, however, and part of that was because they did want to make their sound engine open source. It is called Papa Engine. I don't know enough about game design and sound design to figure out and confirm if that's still available. But as I said, if you're looking to kind of experiment in audio games, that is certainly one of the sound engines that allegedly exists out there that is open source for use. The next one is a game that I have played. It's called The Blind Legend. It is still available. It is available on Apple, Android, and allegedly it's available on Steam. I didn't get a chance to check. It's super fun. You play as Edward Blake, who is a knight who is seeking to defeat the dungeon keeper Thork, which is a silly name. He abducted your wife and gouged out your eyes, and now it's time for some vengeance. You are led through the adventure by your daughter Louise, and when you are playing, the screen is just gray clouds, and you are making your way through the space by listening to where Louise is telling you. Obviously, there's a lot of extra supplemental sounds. The tutorial has you walking through like a city. So there's shopkeepers yelling out what their wares are. There's a horse cart going by, and you have to listen to her. And she gives you clues like, I'm near the fountain, I'm near the fish cellar, yada da. And as you're going, you can find her by navigating through. And once you finish that tutorial, it's time to get started on the actual game. Unlike Papa Sangre, you're not just avoiding the things, you are actually able to engage with them. There are weapons that you can use, and there are different gestures that you use on your phone to use your weapon in the game. It was a lot of fun. It's very tricky to get used to. Again, tying back to that sensory efficiency, I'm just not trained to use my hearing the same way that people without visual impairments are trained to use their hearing. So I'm sure with enough practice I could get it down, but it's very fun and it was a cool experience. I highly suggest everyone goes and tries it out. I'm pretty sure it's free, and yeah, it's a good time. Whoops. All right, so going on to virtual reality, which feels like a very obvious way to create these very immersive environments for gaming, and you are right, it is pretty obvious here. We have things like the Oculus Rift and the Quest, we have the Vive, and this is a very good way to really bring yourself into the setting visually. It fills your whole field. I played Beat Saber for the first time. Finally, my friend has the Quest, and I was just like, oh my god, it's so cool. Like the loading menu, the opening menu for it is this beautiful landscape, and I'm just like, what is going on? I want to hang out here. So it does really bring in all of these visual elements, which is actually also has been used for patients with cataracts. When you develop intense cataracts, it will impact your color perception. A cataract is essentially a buildup of biomaterial over parts of your eye that then become cloudy. Your eye is basically cloudy. And I was reading a very nice article about a place in a senior center that will take something like a VR headset and color adjust it so that the person who is, so if a person without a cataracts looks in, the colors would look super duper weird, but a person with cataracts can now see in proper comparatively color. So they can see what their homes look like, they can see what their families' homes look like, they can see familiar places with the accurate colors. It blew a lot of minds and it was very, very touching. So that technology is already being used to help people with visual impairments. And another aspect of virtual reality that's so great is that immersive, you guessed it, sound. So one of the fun things about presenting this at an AT conference, I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I just said I just want to go on camera.
One of my favorite things about performing or doing this presentation at a conference was I had to explain to a bunch of esteemed professionals and colleagues who the Game Grumps were and why Resident Evil 7 is freaking terrifying. I wanted to find an example of some playthroughs of VR games so that I could comment on it in this presentation. And I was like, oh, who does really good playthroughs? The Game Grumps. What's a really cool game that they do that's immersive and they do it they do it in VR, Resident Evil 7. I'm like, oh crap, I hate scary games. Okay, fine, let's do it. They made it fun. It was fun watching them play it. So what was really interesting about watching them play it is Aaron was playing it, and I lost count of the number of times he was like, this is so much worse, this is so much worse. He had already played it, and the extra element of that immersion was very, very intense. One video actually opened up with Aaron like prepping himself for that like first fight, and he's like, oh my god, it's going to be so bad, I don't want to do this. And they commented that, the commenters on the videos were like, I can't wait to watch you freak out about this part. And one thing that really struck home like a bell was there was a part where Dan makes a comment that he says, like, at least you're not wearing the headphones, because that sound element is going to make it even more intense. This surround sound really puts you in the world, and so when you're in the world, the outside sounds are reduced, you are there, it sounds like you're in the game. And if we hearken back to that sensory efficiency, people with visual impairments are already learning how to figure out where in their space they are based on sound. Where cars are, where settings are, the way things echo off of walls. One of the cane using strategies is actually to tap your cane on the ground. This isn't, feeling around. It's not actually feeling. What you're doing is producing a sound and listening to the way it bounces back to you. Usually you actually use a cane in a sweeping motion if you're actually looking for something. So you are learning all of these strategies about the way sound works. And the more realistic the sound, the more realistic the setting, the more likely you are to use these skills to properly interact with the world within the game. So Resident Evil 7 does have stereo sound and binaural sound. I read that the binaural sound's kind of iffy because they're still kind of working on the tech for that. Just a little heads up about that. All right. So we are going to talk about those two different types of sound right now. We have stereophonic sound versus binaural sound. And I have a quote here from Technopedia. In stereophonic sound, sound is recorded on two different channels and then mixed or blended together for an observable effect in playback. Common methods for creating stereophonic sound involve the placement of two or more microphones for capturing different sound channels and the sophisticated mixing using state-of-the-art sound equipment. The result is that the listener can hear audio in a kind of distributed field. So that's what a lot of people are used to hearing. It's been around, the tech has been around for a long time. A lot of times the headphones, sound different in each ear because it gives that array of sound. And binaural sound, it works a little differently. This is another quote from an article. Binaural is a recording technique that replicates the way we naturally hear sounds. The positioning of our ears on our heads leads to a very specific encoding of sounds. For example, the ears are spaced at a distance apart and the head casts a frequency-dependent acoustic shadow so that, for example, sounds from one side arrive later at the far ear and have a rolled-off frequency response at the other ear. While it sounds complicated, it is how we naturally hear sounds. And again, the goal for making games accessible is to have that sound be as real as possible so that people with visual impairments can, again, use their orientation and mobility and sensory efficiency to work in the space just like they would in real life. I had a quote about this microphone. Give me one quick second so I can find it in my notes. All right, so I am actually missing my notes page for this slide. I thought I had written it and I might have accidentally deleted it. But I do remember what's going on here. This is the device by which the recordings are done. It has microphones in the ear in the location of the eardrums so that when the sound is played and it can be recorded, it is recording it as it hits the eardrums as though it were sound hitting the eardrums. This means that the way the sound wraps around the dummy head impacts the way the sound is recorded, thus producing the effect and allowing for all of the sound to be taken in. It's not so much something's over here, something's over there. It is the way the sound moves. Ooh, shoot. It's the way the sound moves around the head. And this is an actual dummy head used to capture the sound. All right. I want to end this quote, I want to end the presentation with a quote from George Lucas, who said, "I feel that sound is half the experience." And he was referring in particular to movies, but I think that this can extend into all kinds of media. I think it extends into video games. I think it obviously extends into listening to music. It's that sound aspect is very important. We all enjoy the sound aspect. We are quite literally at the Music and Gaming Festival because we know that the sound elements in the music are so essential, and they are an integral part of the experience. And while we view it as a nice, fun, integral part of the experience, and there are some brilliant panels about the way ambiance and mood are set by the music in the game, it also does give that point of accessibility. And the more realistic the sound, the more realistic the setting, the more likely people are to be able to utilize their senses in the space for fun, and if you're a person with a visual impairment, for work and navigation. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes, hand shooting right up.
So I came in a little late. I don't know if you already have talked about this, but the first game that I was ever aware of to use binaural recording was Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice.
Ooh, hold on, let me write that down real fast.
Which, in sort of attempting to simulate as realistically as possible, and I don't suffer from this, so I can't speak to accuracy on it, but attempting to simulate essentially a psychotic break.
Yeah, ooh.
The experience of paranoid schizophrenia.
That's cool.
Hearing voices. And to simulate that, they used a mic like what you showed, the binaural dummy mic.
Yeah. Can you say what the game was again for me, please?
Hellblade.
Hellblade, okay.
But it struck me.
I know, they're always scary games. Can we please make ones that aren't scary?
It's not hard though.
It's scary. It's not.
Okay. Scary but not horror.
It is an action game. It's honestly primarily a walking simulator.
Okay, all right.
But what struck me about it is that, as groundbreaking as it was, it also, I don't know how applicable it necessarily is, because the voices that they recorded using the binaural tech are always in the same position regardless of the player's position. They're head,
I see.
completely independent of whatever the player is doing. So it strikes me that what would be needed for this, and maybe this is the next technological leap, I don't know, is effectively sort of ray tracing technology.
Oh.
So that we can digitally simulate, so that we can record in mono or in stereo, and then plug it into the tech and digitally simulate the effects of the sound bouncing across the head. We're talking about. And
yeah.
I'm wondering if you knew of any tech, like, is that what the Papa engine is already doing? Or is there tech that is already doing that and simulating specifically the head? Because I know stereo has gotten good enough that a lot of competitive shooter players can identify enemies by sound and just where they are. I know, like, Overwatch has put a lot of technology into taking the sound off of walls and muffling it and things like that.
Overwatch I was like, while I was making notes about like areas that I wanted to expand on, and Overwatch was going to be one of my examples. Yeah, so just to make sure that it picked up on any of the recordings and so everyone heard it, we were talking about what the technology is about using like ray tracing to sort of expand off of this. I do not know necessarily where this technology is going, but ray tracing is very cool, and I think that is hopefully where it's going. I don't know too much about the Papa sound engine myself. Like I said, this unfortunately is not really my area of expertise, so I don't know the nuances of it. I do know that it is based in binaural, so I assume that there's some kind of work there, and I would love to kind of see how that's going. Okay. Does anyone? Oh, we have a couple. Yes, I saw your hand first, actually.
I haven't played this game myself, but I've heard of it. It's called Lost and Found, and it's not a scary game from what the reviews say.
Okay.
It's a fully accessible game for people with visual disabilities, and it's you're a dog, and you try to find people.
Oh my God, cute. Okay, I have to go play that like immediately.
It's on Steam. It just came out last year.
Okay, great, cool. I'm gonna add that to my little list. I'm trying to make, so if you were at my previous panel, you know that gaming is something that I like working into my work with my visually impaired students. So I'm also trying to come up with a good list of different audio games to play. And the O&Ms at my agency are all like, wait, can you give me that list so I can work on it? Because like I said, they're the ones who work on the sensory skills more intentionally. So they are like, oh, that's super interesting, let's do it. In case anyone hadn't heard it, it was Lost in Pound with a P.
Lost in Hound.
Lost in Hound, Hound with an H. And it is about a dog who is trying to use its hearing to try to find people. That sounds absolutely precious, and I'm going to go play it tonight. All right, we had another question over here, I think, first.
So can you talk about the role of voice actors and how
Ooh,
the game and
yeah.
how they can make the
Wonderful, yes. Oh, right.
making the experience more immersive? Because we're usually recording mine.
Yes, that's true. So this question was asking about some commentary on voice actors, and it's definitely kind of cool because I think that there are some games where you get a really good wide variety of very talented actors. I loved Hades. If anybody has played Hades, yeah, I see some nods. I thought that I see some enthusiastic nods. One thing I thought was incredible is there's like 4 voice actors for that entire cast, and it's like 1 million people. But all of the voices are so incredibly distinct and different from each other. It's witchcraft. It's crazy. Voice actors are so cool. When you are engaging with a blind person, you do start to sort of understand the differences in people's voices, but it is proper etiquette to always introduce yourself before you talk, because it's not as easy to tell voices apart as you think it is. You think it, but that's because visually you are associating a sound with a thing. So I hear a person talk and I know their voice, so maybe they're in the other room, but I can draw up the mental memory of that's my husband, that's my friend, that's, whoever. So I can draw upon that visual cue, but blind people obviously are not able to do that. So it is proper etiquette to use your name every single time just to make sure they know who it is that you're talking, because there's not as much variety. So I think in games such as Hades, where there are those very distinct voices, it does really help people with visual impairments. But I feel like there are a lot of games that don't have too much variety in voices, and that is going to be a really big drawback because not everybody says their name before they talk. I think that voice acting is actually going to end up being extra critical when you're thinking about creating an immersive environment, because it's going to help you get those nuanced differences in voices. So that was a really great question. All right, and back there.
Are you familiar with a game called The Veil Shadows of the Crown? And if so, do you have thoughts on it?
I have no idea what that game is, and I'm jotting it down.
The idea is the main character is blind, and the only thing that's on the screen are like floating dust motes. So you Otherwise, it's all audio.
I love this, guys. I'm adding all these to my list.
Yeah, it claims to be fully blind accessible. I'm not blind, so I can't speak to how it's actually 100% true. But it seems like the kind of thing you might be familiar with and have thoughts on.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one. So that was The Veil, Shadows of the
Crown.
Shadows of the Crown. Okay, I'm adding that to my list of ones to investigate. That's cool. I hope it's not scary. That's neat. I'm adding that to my list. One thing that I think is interesting that you said was you aren't sure if it's accessible because you aren't blind. And this is something, I don't know if anyone, raise your hand if you were at my previous panel. Yeah, a couple people. So one of the things that I had said was, if you're ever wondering about the accessibility of something, just close your eyes and do it. Because there you go. And people who have visual impairments do have that sensory efficiency training and practice behind them. and we don't. So I could close my eyes and not understand what's going on in a room the same way with someone with a visual impairment could. I played a Blind Legend for the first time, and I was like, I don't know what's going on. Where's Luis? Where's the fish market? I think I hear water. Is that the ocean? But if you are already trained to utilize these skills, it's going to be a lot easier to sort of pick up on that. So my litmus test for is it accessible visually is to close your eyes, because if you can do it, a person who's trained to have these skills absolutely can do it. Like, not to insult everybody, but you are the low bar. And if it can pass you guys, then it can pass someone who has built up these skills over the years. Are there other questions?
Quick question. When you
Yeah.
show the binaural microphone,
Yes.
you'll notice that they almost always have earlobes. I know studies have shown we can detect the verticality of sound as well, based on how it bounces off your earlobes. I remember them doing a study where they put a pipe in there and change it, and
Yeah.
the students learned within like a month to then detect the verticality of the sound just on the different shape of their earlobes. So it
That's cool.
shows even the visually capable were able to
Yeah.
learn very quickly. The brain is so plastic. You can easily adapt to the sound. So even just for anyone, maybe if your sound is above or below you, more beneficial like you said for a shooter, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's really good.
So making this technology available for people that are visually impaired is going to benefit everyone.
Yeah, okay. So catching off of the recording, he was mentioning that, as you can see on the diagram, the ears, while the nose is very basically shaped, the ears are very detailed, and that is because the shape of the earlobe can impact the sounds, and you were saying that there was a
They can detect the sound or above or below them.
yeah, it helps with the sound above and below.
Brain could detect how
Yep.
it reflected off the earlobes, if it was above or below, just
Excellent, yeah, yeah.
something the brain learns quickly, so changing the shape.
It is, absolutely. So yeah, that sensory efficiency skill is something the brain learns quickly. Your brain wants to know what's going on around you, and it's going to figure it out. And sensory efficiency is just, the ways that we have come to develop the, most efficient skills for getting this additional information. There is a strategy for how you feel things in front of you, how you locate when you're not looking, how you read Braille so that you can feel it. That's best. But if your eyes are closed, that your other senses become heightened is because, your brain does want to know what's going on. So these skills are easy to pick up on. Like I said, I'm better at reading Braille by touch than I was before, just because I'm learning how to use those sensory skills. Your brain does develop around that and helps you build up these skills. You all could read Braille. You all could learn to cross the street with your eyes closed. You might not want to. It's a little frightening. I did do it for an activity. But these are all things that anybody can pick up and learn. And I think that it's super cool. You make some really good points about the shape of the ear also having an impact, and even changing it with putty sort of changes the way you process sound.
And the brain adapts to it very well.
Yes, and that adaptability in the brain, very good, yes. All right, anybody else? We still got a lot of time. Like I said, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure what the pacing of this is going to be because I made some adjustments. Yeah?
Only if nobody else has something, I don't want to hear you talking.
That's what I'm doing.
So the first time I ever really thought about the possibility of sound design and tech being used to create game experiences for the blind and for visually impaired people was another horror game.
It's always horror games. Which one?
The Evil Within 2.
The Evil Within 2.
The Evil Within 2? Yeah. There's a boss fight in that game that involves the boss teleporting out of your view and spawning in somewhere behind you.
That sounds terrible. I hate that.
That's sort of a random thing. But the thing is that for various reasons, I played that boss fight enough if I was to the point where if I was using good headphones, I actually could do that fight with my eyes closed.
There you go.
Where he had spawned back in and aim and shoot.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
But the only reason that I was able to do that was I had really good open back headphones that were very good at converting stereo into something that is positionally legible for me, at least as a sighted person who has not developed that sensory efficiency and not had that training.
Yeah, there you go.
So are there any other like hardware developments like that? Like I know that there's a large market for surround sound gaming. There's a large market for kind of repurposing open back studio headphones.
Yeah.
Gaming headsets for that same reason. I was wondering if you're aware of any other like hardware considerations or peripherals or things that are commonly used or you would like to see more commonly used. Helpful either to design around or to just push as this is something that this is accessibility aiding hardware the same way that we have some like capacitive assistive control devices.
Yeah. One of the presentations I'd like to do is about haptic feedback because I think there's a lot of fascinating stuff going on with haptic feedback. So the comment was they brought up The Evil Within 2, a game which has a boss that will disappear and spawn behind you at a random point. And they were saying that they were able to start to figure out where the boss was going to be, so they would turn and shoot accurately. And they were saying that they think that part of the cause for that is their headphones, and they were asking if there's any technology with headphone development. I certainly can't speak too much for it, but I can speak from personal experience. When I was playing a Blind Legend, I was just using my little earbuds, and it was, I think, that there could be much better technology to use that would catch the nuance of the sound than my little guys I got at Target. So I do think that I'm sure hardware is a factor. And when I was playing Beat Saber for the first time, what I liked was that it was my hearing and my ears. I couldn't hear anything else that was going on, but it also wasn't on me. So I didn't have that competing sensory information of like a thing touching my face. And I have noise canceling headphones that I'll use when I'm like doing online meetings or doing online gameplay. And like they start to bother my ears because they're so close. So I would love to see if we're able to still keep that kind of sound design with something that encloses but doesn't necessarily squish. And I think that the way that the Oculus is kind of going, that's the kind of thing that I would really like to start to see. Any other questions? We still have 20 minutes, yes?
I was wondering if you thought about audio descriptions in games.
Necessary. So very necessary. They were asking about how I feel about audio descriptions, and how I feel is that they are not done enough. Especially, I know that there's a whole panel going on about tutorials, and that would be very interesting to dip into as well. But when I was doing my panel about accessible board games, I was talking about different ways of presenting the instructions for a game, and my co-presenter, Octavia, mentioned that there are people who will do recordings of like how to play the game, and here are the pieces, and here's how you take your turns. And I think that that's super great, but the only time I'd ever personally encountered one, they didn't describe any of the pieces. And I think that that's a thing that a lot of people kind of forget is what does this thing look like? What was the movie with John Krasinski where everything's a quiet place? So I was talking to somebody who was visually impaired, and he had listened to it with audio description. He thought it was great because there wasn't any dialogue interrupting it. So he just got to listen to the whole movie without any interruptions. And he said he went through the entire thing just picturing the guy from Scrubs, because at no point was the character ever described. So he later learned that the guy had a beard in this movie, and he was like, I didn't even know because nobody said he did. did, and I think that that's one of those things that is overlooked is the character description. You have no basis for it, even if it's something basic, the character is a woman with long red hair, or the character is a man who has a scar on his face. Keeping it even very basic, they can fill in those details for themselves, but they have no idea what it looks like unless you say what it looks like. So I think that those audio descriptions are extremely essential for the gaming experience. Okay. If there aren't any more questions about this specifically, I wanted to know if anyone had any questions about what I do. I talked about how I teach orientation and mobility a little bit. I'm not one of the professionals, but I do teach sensory efficiency. So does anyone have any questions about what I do as a teacher of students with visual impairments? It's more than just Braille. Yes.
So I think the panel about the gaming accessibility.
The controllers, yes. Mm-hmm.
How do you guys use it? Can you answer the question about the
Yes.
How do you guys use the big red dots?
All right, so this was a panel about accessible gaming controllers, and one of the things that had been brought up, oh, I'm sorry, that's my insulin pump. Please stand by. Okay, one of the questions had been about using the different type of button switches, and the presenter said that they found a bunch of, I'm good. Caitlin's here, she's a fellow diabetic, and she knows the sound of a low blood sugar pump. So she had been talking about the different kinds of switches and buttons that she used, and one of the ones was called the big dot or something. I forget what it's called. It's very, I just am blanking on it. But it is a large disc, and I said that I do have some students that use it in their lessons, and part of that is early concept development of cause and effect. So it's very easy for an infant or a young child to understand, I do something and a result happens. If I go this, the bottle falls over. We can see it happen. A person with visual impairment isn't necessarily going to know, especially at a young age, that doing anything causes anything. So we use things like those giant buttons because they are very sensitive to touch, and you can just reach out and it's a very big target and you can hit it and it will produce something like an effect. It'll make a song go off, it'll turn on your music player, it'll make a toy light up. If you have some functional vision, you'll be able to see the lights. So it teaches the idea of cause and effect. It's also used because for a lot of people with visual impairments, sometimes there are other additional disabilities. I have a couple of nonverbal students, for example, and those are used for communication. So they're able to reach out and hit it. So if you hook it up to a yes or a no, and they can reach out and say yes. If there's another one, they can reach out and say no. So there you go. Yep. I love what I do, so I love talking about it. Anybody have any other questions? Yes.
I know Microsoft had a controller that had a bunch of different ports on it. Is that something that they're still working on?
I use that.
You do?
I just did a panel on it.
You
Yeah.
did? Okay, so that's still something, I noticed that was something that was really interesting that they were doing on it.
Oh yeah, they're still using it. I use it all the time. It's really wonderful. I did a panel about it earlier. Check out the YouTube channel. It's only on the YouTube channel.
Where were you surfing your show? Right?
No, that's so okay. Just for the sake of recording, it was asking about Microsoft's adaptive controller, and adaptive controllers aren't necessarily my jam, so I had loved going to that panel and seeing about that, especially I actually went and told my friend because she has connections with able gamers, and I was like, and they were talking about able gamers, and she was like, that's so cool. So that panel was well received, and I talked about it afterwards with my friends. I just want you to pass that on. Yeah, gaming for accessibility controllers are obviously a factor, and people with visual impairments, like those kinds of controllers, the larger buttons, the larger switches, like I said, the ones that I had been using with my kids, you kind of need that extra element. Fine motor development can kind of come a little more slowly if you can't visually see what it is. All right, anybody else? Are you raising your hand?
Question, but I was looking up those game engines you were talking about.
Yes.
couldn't find the Papa song that it seems that they went off of.
Okay.
Microsoft has a Project Acoustics for Unreal and Unity
Okay.
that does fancy math in really realistic sense.
Fancy math sounds about my extent of knowledge for how these different engines work. So they were saying that they couldn't find the Papa Sangre sound engine, but that Microsoft is developing one. What was it called? Project Acoustics. And I do believe there are other ones because the Where's My Ducky, I forget the one that it said, but it had given a specific engine it had been using as well. It was something very generic sounding. So I do think that there's probably other guys out there. So yeah, please make some more acoustic games. They're very fun. They're a fun challenge if you're sighted. And one of the core concepts, even at the beginning of this panel, but certainly at my board game panel, is that there is a community that comes with gaming. Obviously, we're all here. And so making that accessibility is inviting a whole new person to the table. So making sound games and making accessible board games, it's going to bring in gamers who want to play. We talked about all those reasons at the start. So yeah, please go make some audio games. And if you ever, I'll throw my information back up. If you, no I won't, I lied. Ba-da-ba-da-ba. Hello? Yeah, so if you ever want to reach out and talk to me about the kinds of things you're doing, the kinds of niches that might be filled, if you have any ideas, if you're like, would this be inappropriate for a blind person? Yeah, I would love to talk about this stuff. This is my second panel about gaming accessibility, so clearly it's an interest of mine, and I would love to talk more and answer for more questions. Also, even if you just have questions, I love emotional labor, so if you just want to know, how would a blind person do this? If you're doing a game and or a tabletop game and you want to have a blind character and you're like, I want to do this in a way that doesn't make me look like an asshole, please just reach out and talk to me. I actually have a friend who wanted a character who had albinism, and I have a couple of students with albinism, and they were like, I don't want to be the kind of person who's just like, oh, it's cool because they have white hair and weird eyes. I want to like make a character that actually does this. So I talked out with them like the kinds of limits you had. So we talked about how it would impact your perception checks. We talked about how heat would do extra damage because there's an extreme skin sensitivity that comes with it. And we like built up like the stats for how you would have a character with albinism. And it was a fun challenge for me to think about it and relating to my students, and actually told my students, and they're like, so what stats are they? So, yeah, I would love to jump in and roll for the assist on any of your questions about how blind people do things. I am not visually impaired myself, so I am speaking academically, and that's always something I keep in mind, is I never speak based on experience. I speak based on academia and based on relations with people with visual impairments that I have. So if I don't know it, I know somebody who does, and I do have a network of people with visual impairments that I can reach out to. And I'd like to see this stuff represented more accurately. I feel like everybody who works with anybody with a disability is just like, please just get it right. So I am more than happy to communicate about any aspects of visual impairments. If you have questions, just talk to me about them. Okay. Are there any final questions? If not, we can kind of wrap up early. I saw your hand half go up. Was that a question? Okay. Then we can clap. I'll just wrap up a little early. I appreciate you all coming. Like I said, I know I had some pretty stiff competition with some other cool panels and cool events, so I'm glad that you all made it here, and I'm very thankful. And if you want to talk to me after, I mean, we still got like 7 or 8 minutes to just vibe in here, so feel free to come chat. Thank you.